What if the Dutton Ranch is already infected and nobody knows it yet? What if Yellowstone's biggest threat isn't a rival family, but a deadly outbreak spreading across Montana? What if the Dutton Ranch is hiding the next great animal pandemic? Yellowstone theory. What if everything we think we know about the future of the Dutton Ranch is wrong? What if the greatest threat isn't a rival ranch, a land developer, or another political battle? What if the real danger is already on the ranch, and nobody has noticed it yet? Imagine this. A cold Montana sunrise spreads across the valleys surrounding the Dutton Ranch. The cattle are grazing peacefully, the horses are being prepared for the day's work, and for a brief moment, everything seems normal. Then something strange happens. A ranch hand notices a calf standing completely alone near a fence line. It isn't eating. It isn't moving. It just stands there, staring into the distance. At first, nobody thinks much of it. Animals get sick all the time. But as the day continues, more unusual reports begin coming in. A horse refuses to leave its stall. Several cattle become unusually aggressive. One animal suddenly collapses without warning. By sunset, concern begins spreading across the ranch. And by the next morning, fear has arrived. Because now dozens of animals are showing symptoms. What started as a single sick calf has become something nobody can explain. But here's the question that should have every Yellowstone fan paying attention. What if this is the beginning of a deadly animal pandemic that threatens not only the Dutton Ranch, but the entire state of Montana? The theory begins with Yellowstone National Park. For generations, wildlife and livestock have existed side by side. Massive herds of elk migrate through the region every year. Wolves roam across hundreds of miles. Bison move freely through parts of the ecosystem. Now, imagine that one of those animals is carrying a new disease. Not a disease that kills immediately. Not a disease that can easily be detected. A disease capable of spreading silently from species to species. For weeks, maybe even months, the infection could move unnoticed through wildlife populations. Then one day, it reaches the Dutton Ranch. By the time veterinarians arrive, the outbreak is already far worse than anyone realizes. Samples are collected. Tests are run. Experts analyze the results. Then comes the announcement that changes everything. The disease doesn't match any known outbreak. No treatment exists. No vaccine exists. No one knows how fast it spreads. Suddenly, the Dutton Ranch becomes ground zero for a growing crisis. Government officials arrive. Scientists establish temporary research stations. News helicopters begin circling overhead. And then comes the order nobody wanted to hear. The ranch is placed under quarantine. No livestock can leave. No animals can enter. The Dutton Ranch is effectively cut off from the outside world. For most ranchers, such a situation would be devastating. For the Duttons, it could be catastrophic. Millions of dollars depend on livestock operations. Generations of work are tied to those herds. Every day the quarantine continues, the ranch loses money. But money quickly becomes the least of their concerns. Because the disease keeps spreading. Animals aren't just getting sick anymore. They're behaving strangely. Normally calm cattle become unpredictable. Wild animals begin appearing in areas they have always avoided. Wolves are spotted dangerously close to ranch houses. Elk abandon their migration routes. Bird populations suddenly seem smaller. It's as if the entire ecosystem is changing. And that's when things become truly frightening. Researchers discover the disease is mutating. Each new species it infects allows it to evolve. Every mutation makes it harder to predict, harder to contain, harder to stop. Soon, neighboring ranches report similar symptoms. The outbreak is no longer limited to Dutton land. Montana begins to panic. Ranchers fear losing entire herds. Communities depend on agriculture for survival. If the outbreak continues, thousands of livelihoods could disappear. But while everyone is focused on the disease itself, another mystery begins to emerge. A wildlife biologist studying infected animals discovers something unusual within the virus. Certain genetic markers don't look natural. At first, nobody understands what it means. Then another scientist reaches the same conclusion. The virus appears engineered. Not completely artificial, but altered somehow. The implications are terrifying. Could somebody have created it? Could this outbreak have been prevented? Could someone have known it was coming? As these questions spread, suspicion follows. And if there's one thing Yellowstone fans know, it's that the Dutton family has no shortage of enemies. Developers have spent years trying to acquire the ranch. Corporations have wanted the land. Politicians have viewed the Duttons as obstacles. What if one of those enemies discovered a way to weaken the family without firing a single shot? Imagine how effective a disease outbreak would be. No legal battles. No public confrontations. Just a ranch slowly collapsing under the weight of an invisible enemy. The theory becomes even darker when investigators uncover old environmental reports buried in government archives. Years earlier, concerns had been raised about industrial activity near protected land. Those warnings were ignored. Documents disappeared. Research funding vanished. Now, with the outbreak growing, those forgotten reports suddenly seem very important. What if the disease wasn't intentionally created? What if it emerged because powerful people ignored obvious risks? And what if they're trying to hide their responsibility? The Duttons begin searching for answers. Case follows reports of infected wildlife deep into the mountains. Beth starts investigating financial connections between corporations and government agencies. Rip focuses on protecting what remains of the ranch. Meanwhile, panic spreads across Montana. Tourism begins declining. Businesses suffer. Entire communities worry about their future. Every news channel covers the crisis. Every politician promises solutions. But nobody actually knows how to stop it. Then comes a discovery that changes everything. A young researcher studying infected animals finds evidence that certain species are naturally resistant to the disease. For the first time, there is hope. If scientists can understand why some animals survive, they may be able to develop a treatment. The race begins. Researchers work around the clock. Government agencies rush resources into Montana. The Dutton family puts aside old conflicts to support the effort. For a brief moment, it seems like the nightmare may finally end. Then another twist arrives. The disease jumps again. Not into cattle, not into wolves, not into elk, into migratory birds. And suddenly the situation becomes far worse. Birds travel enormous distances. They cross state lines. They cross international borders. Containment may no longer be possible. The outbreak that began on one ranch could now spread across an entire continent. The realization sends shockwaves through everyone involved. Scientists fear the worst. Officials consider emergency measures. The public begins demanding answers. And the Dutton family finds itself standing at the center of a crisis bigger than anything they have ever faced. As the season reaches its climax, the truth finally starts coming together. The outbreak wasn't a deliberate attack. It wasn't a biological weapon. But it wasn't entirely natural either. Years of environmental negligence created conditions that allowed a harmless virus to mutate into something dangerous. Warnings were ignored. Risks were hidden. Profits were prioritized over responsibility. Now, everyone is paying the price. Armed with evidence, Beth exposes the cover-up. Government officials are forced to answer difficult questions. Corporations face public outrage. The truth finally reaches the world. But even then, victory feels incomplete. Because exposing the truth doesn't cure the disease. Scientists continue working toward a solution. Some progress is made. Certain animal populations begin recovering. Parts of Montana slowly return to normal. Yet one question remains unanswered. Has the outbreak truly ended? In the final moments of this theory, a wildlife researcher is conducting routine tests hundreds of miles away from the Dutton Ranch. The crisis appears over. The public has moved on. The headlines have disappeared. Then the researcher notices something unusual. A test result. A familiar genetic signature. The virus. It's still there. Not in cattle. Not in elk. Not even in birds. But in a completely new species. A species nobody had been monitoring. The researcher stares at the screen in disbelief. The camera slowly zooms in. The music grows darker. And suddenly, everything everyone believed about the outbreak changes. The The pandemic was never defeated. It simply adapted. It waited. It evolved. And now it's preparing for its next chapter. The screen cuts to black. One final question appears. What if the Dutton Ranch wasn't the source of the pandemic? What if it was only the first warning? YouTube title: The Terrifying Yellowstone Theory. An animal pandemic could destroy the Dutton Ranch. YouTube description: What if the next major threat to the Dutton Ranch isn't a rival family or land developer, but a mysterious animal pandemic spreading through Montana? In this Yellowstone fan theory, we explore a chilling scenario involving infected livestock, hidden conspiracies, government cover-ups, and a deadly outbreak that could change the future of the ranch forever. Could the Dutton family survive a crisis of this scale? Or is this the beginning of the end for their legacy? Watch until the shocking ending and decide for yourself.